I was holding a glass of sparkling water near the back wall of my son-in-law's new restaurant, trying to take up as little space as I'd been asked to, when Marcus raised his glass mid-toast, looked right at me, and told the room that every family needs one dirty old man hanging around to remind everybody how far they've come. The room laughed. It was the kind of laugh people give when they're not sure if it's a joke, and they decide the safest thing is to laugh anyway. I didn't say anything. I've had 71 years of practice not saying anything in rooms like that one. Then, 3 tables over, a woman in a grey blazer I didn't recognize stood up. My name is Walter Kessler, and by the time that woman finished speaking, everyone in that restaurant would know exactly why my son-in-law had spent the entire night pretending I was just a guest. Before I take you there, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. I read every one. Now let me tell you how I ended up standing against that back wall in the first place. I spent 34 years as a structural engineer, mostly commercial buildings, the kind of work nobody notices until something goes wrong, and it doesn't. My wife Diane and I raised one daughter, Emily, in a house I designed the additions for myself, on weekends, over about 6 years. Diane passed 4 years ago, a fast decline that started with a cough and ended 11 weeks later. Emily and I got through it the way you get through anything, leaning on each other harder than we knew we needed to. Emily met Marcus at a catering event 2 years after Diane died. He was ambitious, funny at dinner parties, full of plans he described in a way that made you want to believe them. He called me sir for the first 6 months, which I noticed because almost nobody does that anymore. Somewhere around the engagement, the sir stopped, and a certain tone crept in whenever I offered an opinion about anything practical, contracts, leases, the difference between a good location and a location that just looks good on Instagram. When Marcus decided to open his own place, a modern American spot he wanted to call Ledger, the traditional bank financing fell short by a wide margin, and the number that made the difference was mine. I put up $140,000 in direct capital and co-signed a guarantee on the SBA loan that covered the rest, using the house Diane and I had built additions onto as collateral, because Emily asked me to, and because I still remember Marcus shaking my hand at the closing and saying he'd never forget it. He mostly did. So when Emily called and asked me to come to the opening, and asked, gently, if I'd mind standing more toward the back, so I wouldn't steal attention from Marcus's night, I went anyway. For her, not for him. In the weeks leading up to the opening, the pattern had already started showing itself, the way it usually does, in pieces small enough that each one is deniable on its own. Marcus introduced me to a food critic at a walkthrough by saying, "This is Emily's dad. He used to build things. Very old school." I mentioned, once, that his staffing model for the kitchen looked thin for a place that size, and he told me, with a small laugh, that he appreciated the input, but had it handled. He hired a floor manager 2 weeks before opening night, to replace one who'd quit, and didn't mention until the walkthrough that the new hire had never run a kitchen this size before, which was exactly the kind of thing I'd been asking about all along. I overheard him on the phone with a supplier a week before the opening, telling them my money had just been a formality, that he'd have found financing somewhere regardless, and that people like to feel important when they write a check, which is fine, no harm in it. There was one afternoon, about 10 days before the opening, when I drove over unannounced to drop off a set of chairs Diane and I had kept in storage, sturdy ones, the kind that hold up in a busy dining room, thinking they might help fill out the patio section. Marcus thanked me for them in the doorway, and then, before I'd even gotten back to my car, I heard him tell his floor manager that his father-in-law liked to feel useful, and that the chairs were fine, nothing special, but it didn't cost anything to let an old man feel like he'd contributed something. Emily caught the tension building and asked me, the way she does, to please just keep the peace at the opening. So I went to that opening exactly the way she asked. I stood near the back. I didn't say a word about the loan or the house or the $140,000. I just watched Marcus work the room like it was entirely his own creation, and I noticed a woman at a table near the kitchen doors I didn't recognize, watching him a little too closely for someone who was just there for the free appetizers. Then came the toast. Every family needs one dirty old man hanging around. The laugh that followed. And then the woman in the grey blazer stood up. "My name is Renata Hollis," she said, "and I'm the accountant who structured this restaurant's financing 18 months ago. I think it's worth the room knowing exactly whose money is holding this building up tonight." Marcus's smile didn't move for a second, the way a smile doesn't move right after it's already dead. The SBA loan on this property required a personal guarantee beyond what Marcus and Emily could offer on their own, she said. That guarantee was signed by Walter Kessler, using his home as collateral, along with a direct capital contribution of $140,000. Without that signature, this restaurant does not exist. I structured the paperwork myself. I know exactly whose name is on it. Nobody in that room laughed this time. Marcus found his voice first, a little too fast. "That was a joke, Walter. Come on, everybody knew it was a joke." I set my glass down on the nearest table instead of answering right away. "You told your supplier my money was a formality," I said, my voice even, the way it's been even for 71 years, in rooms exactly like this one. You told a food critic I used to build things, very old school, like the word used was doing some work. And tonight you told 60 people I'm a dirty old man hanging around to remind everyone how far they've come. I signed away collateral on the house my late wife and I built additions to with my own hands so you could have this room to say that in. Marcus's face changed the way weather changes, slow, then all at once, and for just a moment, before he recovered enough to say something defensive to the room, I saw something honest cross his face. Something closer to shame than anger, which told me he knew exactly what he'd done and just hadn't expected anyone to say it out loud, in front of investors and a food critic on opening night. I didn't need to defend myself after that. Renata Hollis, the accountant, had already done the math out loud, in front of everyone who mattered to him professionally, and math like that doesn't need me to add anything. Emily found me 20 minutes later, out on the sidewalk where I'd gone to get some air. Her makeup a little smudged, her voice tight in the particular way it gets when she's been crying and decided to stop. "Dad," she said. I didn't know he'd been saying things like that. About the money, about you. "I believe you," I said. "I asked you to keep the peace tonight," she said, "and I feel sick that I asked you to shrink yourself for his opening after everything you did to make it happen." "You didn't know," I said. "Now you do." We stood on that sidewalk for a while, not saying much. The restaurant's new sign glowing behind us. Ledger, in a font Marcus had spent 3 weeks choosing. Emily said she needed some time to think about what all of this meant for her marriage, and I told her that was hers to work through, not mine, and that I wasn't going anywhere regardless of what she decided. I didn't stand up in that restaurant, and I didn't need to. Renata Hollis, a woman I'd never met before that night, did the standing for me, because she'd looked at the paperwork 18 months ago and known exactly what it would eventually take for somebody to say the truth out loud in a room that had decided not to. This past weekend, Emily came by for coffee, just the two of us, the way we used to before Marcus, before the restaurant, before any of it. She told me things at home had gotten quiet, in a different way, careful, the way a house gets when somebody's been caught in something and knows it. I told her I wasn't asking her to choose anything. I just wanted her to know I was still standing right where I've always stood. We sat at my kitchen table, the one I'd built the leaf for myself, the year Emily turned 10, and she asked me, quietly, whether I'd ever really planned to say anything that night, if Renata Hollis hadn't stood up first. I told her the truth, that I probably would have gone home and let it sit, the way I'd let most of it sit for 2 years, and that some part of me was grateful a stranger had done what I hadn't yet found the nerve to do for myself. I don't know what happens with Marcus and me from here, or with his marriage to my daughter, and that's genuinely not mine to decide. I know what happened with me that night, and that's the part I care about most. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand an apology. I set my drink down, said what was true, and let the numbers speak for themselves, the same way they always do when somebody finally lets them. Here's what I've learned, standing against the backs of rooms for most of my life. People will let you fund the whole building and still ask you to stand somewhere you won't be noticed, right up until the moment somebody else in the room decides you deserve to be seen. I didn't need to defend my own name that night. I just needed to still be standing there when the truth finally got said. Now I want to hear from you. Has anyone in your family ever tried to make you invisible in a room you helped build? Tell me about it in the comments below and where you're watching from tonight. If this one meant something to you, share it with somebody who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next one.